This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of the Town of North Haven.
All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the August 17th Board of Finance meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. First, I'd like to welcome our members back from hopefully a wonderful summer, and now we have 10 months of work ahead of us. I think most of the people in the room know, perhaps some people at home do not, that Mr. Monaco has resigned and taken a position as Director of Administration and Procurement within the Town of North Haven. We do have an open board seat, which I know Mike and the Board of Selectmen would like to fill over the next month, so hopefully we'll have a full board for our September meeting. Having said that, if we'd like to start with the agenda, we do have the minutes from our meeting from back in May. I'll take a motion, then any discussion on the minutes. Sorry.
Yeah, questions. I'm not sure if this motion should be made before or after a motion to accept, but I just wanted to make a motion to amend.
Yes, I as well.
All right, let's start with Mike.
I was unable to review these minutes, but that's okay. On page 3 of the minutes here, or is it 4? The last page of the minutes, I'm sorry.
No, it's page 3. You're right.
The board members reviewed and discussed the reconciliation of the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget. That was something that I brought before the board just for discussion. Not that we ever have any official conclusion or agreed upon figure. But I did want to replace it. I wanted to more or less enter what I presented into the record. So I just wanted to replace that sentence with these 3 sentences here. Mr. Hallahan presented his reconciliation of the financial outcome of the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget after inclusion of applicable tax revenue received after June 30th, 2021, and the full acknowledgement of MRSA income and spending. He asserted that fiscal year 2020-21 concluded with a surplus of $110,200. Board members discussed his presentation with no formal concurrence or disagreement. I thought that was brief and reasonable.
All right, Michael, can you email that to Tammy? We'll include
Yes.
that, okay?
Any objections from the other board members?
Does there have to be a second to the amendment?
Yeah.
I'll move it.
Thank you.
Any second?
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Nancy?
Yeah, I just had one quick comment again on page 3 of the minutes. The resolution for $34,000 Public Works vehicle body replacement.
Yes.
I know we all voted on that. It was a unanimous agreement to go forward and to withdraw this sum of money from our contingency fund. But then subsequent to that particular meeting, we found out from Mr. Frieda that we decided not to go forward with that particular transaction. So again, because this is a historical document, I think it's worth putting parenthetically just the statement that there some sort of language that indicates that this was not done despite the unanimous vote and that there was no expense or withdrawal from the contingency fund.
All right, my reaction is we have something coming up under old business that we're going to, and it's this item exactly, Nancy, that Mike is here for, that we're going to talk about. And I guess with respect to your comment, you're right, I agree. It's a historical record, and that didn't occur at our meeting last time. It occurred subsequent to, and I think it'll be solved by the fact that this month's minutes should reflect what's going to happen with that particular item.
Okay, so it doesn't need to be changed then? Is that what you're...
We did pass the resolution.
No, I completely understand. But you're saying that because it will, you think, as of this evening, go forward?
how
Yeah.
this issue will be resolved.
Right.
We're going to bring it up tonight, Nancy, with an explanation.
That's totally fine.
So-
Okay.
Okay,
All right,
All right.
I
That's
move
satisfactory.
to accept the minutes
Here, a second, please.
as amended.
Second.
All in favor?
aye.
All right. So, I actually had already talked to Mike. I'd like to actually just move the agenda about a little bit and go to old business first, and this will get to Nancy's question. But Mike Maturo is here, Nancy, to speak on this particular item. As you've already indicated, this sum did not get expended. There will be a request for a new expenditure of $52,705, but I'm going to let Mike, free to explain a little bit, and Mike Maturo will talk about it as well.
So, thank you, Mrs. Barrett, because that's exactly what happened. I mentioned that at that previous meeting. So, the situation was that we ended up canceling the purchase order and not taking it out of contingency, and that's why you still see in the year-end reports there's $300,000 left in contingency. And the reason was, Mike brought it to my attention, he came to see me, that the specifications on what we thought we were going to get, a pure stainless steel body truck, did not happen. It was more of a composite truck. And the composite truck was not nearly as, would not have nearly been as effective as the stainless steel truck, because it would have been a little bit more vulnerable to rust and decay down through the years. So what I said to Mike was, we'll go back out and get it re-quoted. The quote came in for about $18,000 more. I've given Tim the exact numbers. So the new expenditure is roughly about $52,400. However, as part of that, there were components to the original quote that were not included in the original quote, and they were items that either Public Works would have to do to help retrofit the truck themselves or hire someone else to do that. So as part of the new quote, the $52,475, I think that's the rough number, that we are going to be getting added in about 4 or 5 or 6 different things that we would have had to spend time and money either at Public Works or hire someone else to do to retrofit that. So the new quote includes everything fully loaded with no additional work done by Public Works or hiring another outside contractor to do so. I've asked Mike to come here to give the little bit more specificity on that. I can go through it with you, but Mike, I wanted him to come. If you would stand up here, Mike, and address the Board of Finance.
If I could just make one quick correction, Mike. If you look at the contingency fund from the last fiscal year, we did actually have the withdrawal of money for that sanitation
from the
truck.
sanitation, right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we didn't have the full
That's
300,000.
right. We didn't take the $32,000 out.
Exactly.
We previously authorized that other vehicle.
Right,
So
that's
Michael, go right
correct.
ahead.
Please.
Well, with this body, unfortunately, it was a miscommunication with the vendor. We ordered a stainless steel body, total stainless steel body for this truck. Unfortunately, he quoted us with, like Mike said, a stainless with regular steel. So I went back and we were able to get a estimate from them for a stainless. The total for the stainless, I mean, this is 2 months ago, so I'm gonna put a couple thousand on that due to steel surcharges. It would be $45,000 from the same company. With my town mechanics doing additional work on the vehicle that is going on. What I did is, I had my head mechanic go out and search for a new company, and he was able to find truck builders which customizes bodies that will fit on this, and they'll do the additional work, as in R&R, sandblasting the frame, epoxy coating it with primer, and then painting it, changing any hoses, electrical boxes, and anything else that needs to get changed on the truck for the additional cost. So instead of 18, I would say it would be 7,000 to 8,000 additional for the cost of this body and this company doing it. So once this company mounts this body, this is ready, set, go for the season ahead.
So the total expense, Mike, the new expense is 52,000, Tim, you have the exact number there?
52,705.
52,705. And in additionally, you want to talk about the setting the flow meters and all that also?
Yeah, this actually, once they're completed with this project, this truck will be ready to do whatever we need it to do, haul sand, salt the roads, whatever. So this is mounting the body on the chassis, replacing any hoses, electrical units that run the system. It's a total reconditioning of the truck. So once they're done, like I said, it's ready for the road. So they're going to do everything my mechanics were going to do. But unfortunately, I'm down a mechanic at this time, so that would put that vehicle aside. And we would have to do anything that breaks down that's on the road currently. So
Was this a dump truck, Mike? What was this?
this is a six-wheeler with an all-season body that we use for salting of the roads.
Okay.
Was that a 10 ton?
It's 15.
50? Good size.
And Mike, what would be the cost of this new?
The body,
The whole thing?
the installation.
If we just
Oh,
scrap
for
the
a
whole
truck
thing?
And
Exactly.
right now, I would say it would be over 200,000.
Is there a warranty
Just
on that,
because of
Mike?
the increases. What's that?
Is there any type of warranty on something like this?
The warranty, the work that they're gonna complete. The body, I mean,
Yeah.
being it's stainless, it's gonna outlast the truck
Yeah.
and possibly the next truck that it goes on.
Yeah.
What I like about this dump body is it's mechanically friendly. If there's anything that goes on with the actual conveyor, it separates, I could pass along this, it actually separates from the body, and they're able to do any greasing and a replacement of the conveyor. It's so mechanically friendly.
Yeah.
I was like, this is the body to go with.
Thank you.
So I'm very
Good
happy
choice.
with the body that was brought to my attention. I'm like, this is the one we're going with. Unfortunately, I didn't like what happened with the vendor that we originally got the quote for. So I'm like, let's move on. Let's get this vendor. He's gonna build the body, put it on our truck, and it's hands-free for our staff.
Thanks, Mike. Any further questions from the board for Mike?
And the hoses and so forth that you're talking about are more for the functioning of the actual truck itself as opposed to the functioning of the engine, correct? Because
Yes,
the
the
engine is
functioning
fine.
of the body, the
Understood.
units on the body, and the sanding unit.
Mm-hmm.
So this company will recondition the truck and get it ready for the new body that gets placed on the actual vehicle.
They local?
They're out in Terryville, Connecticut. Very good customer service. We have no issues calling them and getting a new quote. They're like, oh yeah, no problem.
Is this a private or a public company?
But it's a private company. I mean, they customize.
Meaning privately owned? Is it like
Yeah,
is
privately
it a
owned,
mom and pop, or is it like a big national company?
I think it's a local company,
Local.
just a private, I would say family owned, but I'm not 100% on that. But it's a small company, not like the original company.
Got it.
Yeah, I just want to say I support this move, and any move that's like it that saves the town money. This is really a very good option to execute. And so you must be taking lessons from a former police chief. We did reuse a lot of things in this town and improve the lifespan of the functionality of certain components. So thank you very much for going in this direction.
Thank you.
And
One
I'm,
more question, Mike. How's the engine in this truck? You know, we're talking about the dump part. What about the front end?
It could go years.
Oh, good. Okay, so we're not throwing good money out of it.
That's the motivation.
Mechanically sound
Good.
truck. So
Right.
by replacing this body, it could go
Right.
10, 15 years
Great.
Right.
more.
yes, and I'm
Good job.
like Mr. Hallahan, I'm very much in support of trying to save what we can, salvage what we can, as long as it has a lot of life left in it, but also to make use of some of our local US-owned businesses. I think that's a great thing.
Oh, definitely.
All right, thank you, Mike. So I think the plan would be that we would accept a motion to take $52,705 out of the contingency for the fiscal '23 budget year. So if one of the members would like to offer the motion.
Right, so it's not an amended motion of a past motion?
I guess
No,
I'm not
because
that
it's
skilled in
from a
Robert's
different
rules.
fiscal year,
Yeah,
right?
it's a different fiscal year. Good point. So if one of the members would like to offer that.
But we don't have to undo the prior motion that was made.
There's lots of money, Mike, that we requisition over the years that doesn't get spent, right? I mean,
We can
we-
reference in the minutes
Right.
what we're doing here.
Well, I will make that motion for that sum in the way that you'd like to state it.
all right, so Mike has a motion to take $52,705 out of the contingency budget for fiscal '23 for the purchase of a dump body truck. We'll take a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. And Tammy, if you wouldn't mind, when you do the minutes, make mention that this is in substitution of the dump body from the prior meeting, please. All right, thank you, Mike.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Good job.
All right, so I'm going to hold the rest of the old business we'll come back to that. We'll go back to the top. Before we start the new business, I think Mike has an update on our search for a director of finance.
Yes, so we have hired a young lady, Ingrid Massey's her name, and hopefully I can bring her to the next meeting. She will serve as our controller. She does not have a CPA designation, but she has extensive financial experience in terms of putting budgets together, reviewing budgets, running reports. She also has a knowledge of Munis, which is key for us because we're, like most municipalities, on a Munis system. So I'll be introducing her, I hope, at the next meeting. She has just started, actually, and what we're doing is we are, with some of my relationships with other cities and towns, we're going to be having her as part of our training to go visit a town who has very similar reporting procedures as we do. And we'll probably put her there for a couple of days. I worked it out with the mayor of the town there, and meeting with their finance department. She'll be back here, and what we're going to be doing also, Rich Monaco and I, we will be ensuring that there's a level of cross-training downstairs where everybody else knows what everyone's doing, so that if, God forbid, someone's out, then someone else can pick up the pace. So Ingrid will be learning all aspects of account payable, account receivables, everything that's done downstairs. But again, she's got great background, and I'm looking forward to having her here so I can introduce her to each and every one of you. So that's been done.
Great.
Thank you, Mike.
You did warn her about certain finance board members. Might be a challenge.
That's great.
Thank you.
So she has already begun working, is that what you're
Just
saying?
this week, yes.
Terrific.
Yes.
And where did you say she was coming from?
Her last job, I believe, was University of New Haven in the financial department there. But she also has worked for other companies too.
I thought you worked at the old K Expenditures.
Yeah, she did work
yeah,
there too.
Coslow, is it Coslow in it, something like that?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. I think you really like her. Just a wonderful young lady, great interpersonal skills, and she'll be here. And Ingrid and I will be updating everyone on the finances every month from this point forward, so.
Great.
Okay, thank you, Mike. So let's go back to the agenda. Under new business, we've got our regular reports. Let's start with June. Any comments, questions on the revenue?
Give me just a second. Revenue. Yes.
Mike, you seem like you have something that you'd like to say.
I'll wait.
Well-
Let them speak first. Okay. I'm here for the end of the meeting.
Just not the beginning.
I just had a couple of questions on the very first page. Why was the special revenue fund transfer under cash surplus 30% less than what we expected? It was only $487,000 rather than the $700,000?
At the time that we put that budget together, Ed and I, we thought we had $700,000 in that fund, but we didn't. We had $490, I believe, so we booked it in at $487. We didn't have the money to cover the $700,000 in the fund that we thought we did at the beginning when we put the budget together the previous year.
I see. And this is from police off-duty
Yes.
usage, that type of
Yes.
thing? Okay. It's unusual that that's low. Okay. And just some general comments. Revenue from interests and liens that you can see in the next section was 153% of expected. And again, I just think that that's kind of a sad commentary because it wound up being a big blip in the last month of the year. So again, this is from tax collections that I assume are overdue. On the flip side, we received a ECS grant that was larger than expected. But again, the revenue from adult education was only 39%. So that's a little bit disturbing that we don't have our adult population that's as actively engaged in the adult education. I think we've mentioned before that we brought in an extra $100,000 in pilot revenue, so it was 109%, which is great. And of course, we're all very well aware of the three sources of state and federal aid: ARPA, 1.17 million, MRSA, 1.86, and FEMA was a total bonus, because it wasn't budgeted at all, at an additional $767,000. But I do have to ask why we are still using the same system for accounting for municipal projects money. Namely, in the year-to-date, we're recording 0 received. And so my first question is, how much did we get in June? Because there's no indication in any of the reports
We're
here.
going to be changing this, by the way. We're going to be changing this in the next series of reports because, as I mentioned to Tim, that we're always going to be in a hole here because we're always showing 0 in this amount. So this municipal grant and aid. So to answer your question, 2.2 million came in.
Okay, so that's what Mr. Monaco had anticipated.
2.2 million.
Was we budgeted 1.8.
Right.
But we actually received a total of 2.2, because
Right.
again, we have recorded as
Right.
0.
Right. So
Right.
what we're contemplating doing, if you go to the far column there, you see the 900 and
Negative,
Right.
negative 939.
Right.
That's
So
a big
that-
difference.
That's what we pulled out of the expenses.
Right.
For streets and roads and storms and everything else, blizzards.
Right.
So in effect, to show a true picture here, we should take the 2.2 million, subtract the 900,000+, and show a net revenue received. Because we used 900,000+
I understand,
out of what the budgeted revenue was.
right,
So unless we correct this, we're always going to be in a hole on this.
right. Again, this is what Mr. Hallahan has pointed out, and I think we've discussed this many times. What you really need to do at the end of all of this, and we can discuss it when we get to that sheet, is when you look at total revenue for the year, you should subtract off, if there is, say, a revenue shortfall, you should subtract off the 2.2 million, or if we have a surplus, add it. And then on the flip side, on the expenditure side, you should always subtract this total amount that's listed here, because it's reflected as a negative expenditure.
We've done that.
Which means,
That's what we do.
Yeah, I think you mean the opposite, right?
Good. So,
well, again, it kind of depends on how you end. If you end with a surplus, then you're adding. If you're winding up with, say, an under expenditure, as we did last year, then it really should be an over expenditure, because we're reflecting it as a negative number. Remember last year, meaning a year ago,
Yeah, well,
it was $753,000 under expenditure. In fact, if we applied the $1.3 million in MRSA money that we received and spent, then it really should have been reflected as a $500,000 over expenditure. So this is the point that Mr. Hallahan made, that, a year ago, when we were really talking about the 2021 close of the annual budget, we really should have started with a $1.6 million deficit, just for the reasons we're talking about, exclusively because of MRSA and the way that we're handling it. So, but anyway, but you're saying in this current fiscal year, Mike, we're going to do this differently. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
All right, thank you.
Let me just repeat what I said. So in the expenditure reports, we pulled out all of the, I'm going to use the word again because that's what everyone's accustomed to, the MRSA-related expenses out of the expenditures. That's the minus you see there. But we showed 0 for revenue, which distorts the fact that we did receive 2.2, of which we used 900,000+.
No, what it distorts is actually the budget for streets and roads. It makes streets and roads, as we'll get to, look like, oh, we only spent 75% of the money that we budgeted, when in fact we spent much more than that.
That's what Mr.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
but that's what the money's for, to
Right.
pull it out of the expenditures.
Yeah.
That's what the money's there for. That's why they give it to us.
I understand. I'm not saying that we shouldn't use the money. I'm just saying that the way it's reported doesn't accurately reflect what we're budgeting and
All right, but
what
I
we're
think all of us agree that
Yeah.
that there's a change that's going to be made, and I think we all agree it's probably better for all of us and for the town, right?
I completely agree.
Okay.
Any other comments on revenue? Mike, you seem like you had something. Was that it or something else?
Well, that was it, in that I was under the impression that we were going to be able to handle the reconciliation last year differently than we did in previous years. But we so far, it's being handled the same way here. And so, as usual, I will issue my summary reconciliation analysis later, hopefully in September, as long as we do receive the other reports that are not here today. The MRSA spending spreadsheet that we, and the special funds report
Yes.
for the end of the year.
Right.
So
Yep.
that's my request to Mr. Frieda tonight.
Yeah.
is that For those 2 reports, that we get them prior to the September meeting.
Yeah, you'll have them.
Yes.
So I just want to tie into what Michael just said, though.
Yeah.
So we could have done it, the reason that I made the decision to show it this way, because this is the way Ed had done it, and we had done it in past years, okay? So rather than change course and surprise everybody at the end of the fiscal year, it was my thought that we start it in the beginning of the fiscal year, and then we show it in the next 12 months of the fiscal year. So that's why I said that we're going to change this.
Okay.
Rather than shift gears at the end of the fiscal year, which would be different than what we did the previous fiscal year.
I still thought there were 2 facets to it, and we could have changed facet B. Facet 1 is the way it's reported on a monthly basis, and the second facet is the way it's handled at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But,
Right.
anyway, it is
Right.
what it is.
So we'll get that, we're going to do that.
And
Mike.
we will, amongst ourselves, once again, acknowledge the income and expenses
Right.
later, when those reports are made. My other question just had to do with we probably asked this before and I was sleeping, the federal ESSER 2 grant.
So,
That was the question that,
That was the question she asked.
well, let me
Mike,
answer.
go ahead, Mike.
Let me answer it. So it's a good question. So Ed and I made a mistake last year, and the mistake was that we added it on the town side of the revenue, but it's not coming into town. It goes to the Board of Ed. So the fact that we had this in here, it wasn't until halfway through the year that we realized that we can't capture credit for the revenue. So if federal ESSER comes back again, you won't see it in this. We looked at it last year and said, well, since we add ECS on this side of the budget, Ed and I, we'll include it. Because the formulation was that the Board of Ed would draw the money down in stages. The check would come to the town. That's why we put it in the budget. And then we would shift it over to the Board of Ed. But the reality was that we should have kept it on the Board of Ed side, not showed it as a revenue item.
Yeah, so it's similar to the other special
Yes.
grants that they've
That's right.
received. But there's always, I don't want to say confusion, but there's more ignorance. We don't know whether the items that grant is intended for Our regular budgetary items on the Board of Ed side, relief in some way for the lack of revenue or maybe additional expense, or additional expenses that are outside of their original budget or not originally written into their original budget. And for that reason, you know, of course, there's alternating philosophies about how this should be treated, whether it should be treated as a regular revenue item of the town dispersed to the Board of Ed, or something that goes directly to the Board of Ed that is in addition to their appropriated budget by the town.
Right.
Well, what benefit is it to the town by having it come to us first?
Well, it's beneficial through what that grant does.
But if we're giving it to the Board of Ed-
I believe that we have received reports from the Board of Ed about how that money has been allocated.
I guess, Mike, and I have to, I'll say this, admitting I don't know a whole lot about the ESSER grant, but the distinction I would draw between the ECS and the ESSER grant is the ECS is it is a grant for education, but it's unrestricted,
Right.
Which I think is why we show it on the town side, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the ESSER grant, to my knowledge, has restrictions on what it can be spent on, right?
Yeah, well, ECS is also intended to bring slight property tax relief
Correct.
to each and every town. So that's why it's a general budget item.
Right. Diane, Jim, any questions on the revenue?
Well said.
Expenses?
Again, I think it would be really helpful if we had a very clear set of criteria for what is included in our revenue budget with respect to grants, because I asked this very same question when we were putting together the budget. And so, for example, the ARPA money that was allocated not to the town, but specifically to the Board of Education was not included in our budget, and yet I consider it to be, you know, very similar to the ESSER 2 grant. So there seems to be some sort of discrepancy. Now, you say that it was an oversight, Mike, but I think that one thing that would make this absolutely crystal clear, not just to you and to the finance department, but to everyone on this board, is if we had a very clear, ironclad definition of what should and should not be included. Because I think most other towns did not include ESSER 2 in their revenue budget.
It wasn't really an oversight, it was a mistake.
Yeah.
We misread
Okay.
it. We misread it because we were.
I'm trying to be nice.
Right, and I said it.
Yeah,
Ed and I
yeah.
made a mistake because we were told we were gonna get the money on the town side. Mm-hmm. And that's why we put it in there.
But the ARPA money went directly to the Board of Ed, or did it come through the town?
It didn't come through us, no.
Okay, so it went directly to them.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we need some transparency, because when there's overages, they've done like printers and things, but what are they doing with this? And it would be good for us to see what they're doing.
Right.
Because if they're using it for something and then they have extra money, we wanna make sure they're not doing this, using it for the same thing, or, I agree.
Precisely,
Yeah.
precisely.
Let's move on to expenses.
Okay. Expenses. All right, let's see here. So one comment that I'd just like to make in general was in going through these, again, this is just the year-end expenditures, not July, but just the year-end expenditures. I went through and I looked at each of the departments that were actually over budget, and it came to a total of 12. And as I mentioned before, I think you would add a 13th of streets and roads, which was only listed at 75.3%, if we did not handle MRSA the way that we currently do. So I guess my question to Mr. Frieda is, what are the consequences of departmental overages? Again, I'm not looking for any punitive actions, but some combination of department heads being accountable for their budget, but also how can we use this information going forward to develop the next budget? Perhaps these numbers were too small, perhaps they were too large and just mismanaged. It's hard to know. But when you have 12 departments that are actually 100% and more of what we've budgeted, I think it's important to start off the year on the right footing.
Yeah, so I would say that it's not so much consequences, it's an analysis of each department as to the reasons why. And some of these expenditures are, you see these categories where the maintenance is an example. Some of these things pop up, and you have no way of predicting they're going to pop up. My goal was always to take 500 plus line items in the budget and make sure the budget's balanced. And this year, when you look at these reports, it's like a $96,000 surplus, okay? Not counting the Board of Ed. When you look at the difference between revenue and expenses. So in the next budget planning cycle, each department head gets spoken to. We go line by line in terms of the reasons why. Is it the fact that they were underfunded? Was there an issue with workman's compensation? Was there an issue where you had to replace staffing? So there's a process that goes on every year with each department head in terms of the reasons why. That's what we do.
But the building maintenance and repair, we talk about it every month. Is there a way we could get a sheet that tells us what building? Because it's in here again. It's a lot. We get the reasoning, but it would be nice to know, like, what buildings? Is it the same buildings? Is it?
Mike, I'm surprised that you're saying that. I'm gonna have to challenge you on that. I noticed at our last workshops, I would challenge the department head stating that hypothetically one particular line item was $2,000, and every year they spend $10,000. And I challenged them as to why they're putting in $2,000 again. So if you're telling us that you review these with the department heads, something's not right.
Yeah, well, they may think it really should be 2,000, then it ends up to be 10,000. But the reality is, we balance every budget here. So I'm less concerned about individual lines. I'm more concerned about the overall balancing of the budget. So there is, in a 500 line item budget, we see 27 lines, let's say, that are overspent. The key things that we'll look for is to why some of the large expenditures are over, whether it's overtime, workman's comp, or whatever it may be. So it's an imperfect process doing a municipal budget. You're never going to be able to come in on target with every single line item. But the history here is a history of balanced budgets.
I think to answer, or give my perspective on Jim and Nancy's question, to me, it's twofold. It's a management issue, right? I mean, as Mike said, he meets with department heads, and one of their goals, I'm assuming, stated or unstated, is they have to meet their budget, right? And I think the second thing is, some of these departments, police, fire, obviously, have their own separate boards, right? And to me, those boards should be going over their finances every month and trying to keep them on task, right? Now, I was just sort of skimming. I mean, I did the same thing, Nancy. I didn't count everyone because, truthfully, some of the small dollars don't resonate with me, including the very first one, which is the Board of Selectmen, which is over $5,000,
I'm going to skip over that one.
Right, I mean, but, fire was over. I think fire was 103%, and they have one of the bigger budgets, right? So
Legal was 36% over.
Yeah, that was judgments and claims,
substantial.
right?
Right.
So
Right, I mean,
legal's
so-
not a department. Legal, they're
Right, it's
outside
not.
attorneys. They're not a
Again.
department.
So,
Again.
listen, your point's valid, and to me, sorry, the expectation from all of us is that they need to meet their budget. Absent that, they have to have a reasonable explanation, and I guess if it's Mike's perception that they're not managing it well, then I think that's a management problem for him to resolve.
Right.
Now, I
Mr.
think
Chairman.
as far as,
But you brought up a good observation. You said they're supposed to be reviewing it on a monthly basis. But do they? Do they review?
I don't know the exact
Yeah,
answer.
we do.
That's the question.
We do.
Right.
We do.
I meant like the Board of Fire Commissioners and Police Commissioners.
Oh, well, they
That's what-
get the reports. Yeah, they'll get we've, I don't want to say authorized, we have sent the financial reports, so the boards will look at
So
it.
they do get it, okay.
Yeah, but I'm the one that has the oversight, and then, of course, this board, in the monthly meetings. So, so we have a lot of departments that have come in under, and those that have come in over. Legal's not a department, so you can toss that aside. No one here realizes, except me, what goes on behind the scenes legally.
Right. No.
Cities and towns are so vulnerable to lawsuits. So I can spend all night going through every detail here. So it's easy to look at reports and say, well, this is overspent. Well, yeah, there's reasons why.
Right.
There's tremendous reasons why. And I deal with those reasons every day.
Right. So again, many of us have our corporate hats on when we look at this, right? And we know how it's handled in corporate America. This is obviously very different. This is municipal government.
Right.
And so that's why I'm asking you very specifically, one of the interesting things about the transfer report, which I always appreciate getting, is if you look at the bottom line and you see the amount of money that has to be transferred to departments as a grand total, it's $1.8 million. So that's a lot of moving money around in order to cover overages, right?
But-
And again, as you say, there are many departments and many line items that are under. So you have that ability to move money around, but it's not pocket change.
But-
And so really it's just a question of, from a management philosophy standpoint, how should this be addressed?
But, so that the people watching on TV understand this, that this sheet here you're referring to, this has been.
The packet,
That
no,
packet,
the bigger
okay,
packet,
right.
yeah.
But this is what goes to the town meeting. That this sheet was 3 times larger than what it is in the past 2 or 3 decades.
Mm-hmm.
So I can make an argument that we have reduced the number of items that go to a town meeting every year. Because these are the 2 things that the town has to vote on.
Understood.
Those issues have been going on here for 50 years, what you're pointing out. There's nothing different about municipal government that has changed today. The bottom line is, there's a lot of overages and underages, but we still, once again, came in with a modest surplus this year.
Right, but as the budget grows, of course, the quantity of each of these line item discrepancies is also going to grow,
But in
right?
the end, everything balances out. Everything balances out. So my goal is to balance budgets. We have to allow for the accordion effect that happens, the expansion and the contraction of the different line items. That's why the forefathers here in North Haven put this in, that this has to go to a town meeting for town meeting approval, to show the public where the overages are and where the department transfers are. This is no different than it's ever been here, but this is a lot less than it used to be.
Right. What is different is that we are still suffering from the effects of a pandemic. So we still have that inability to precisely forecast both revenues and expenditures, which makes us even more vulnerable to these types of transactions and these types of transfers. So,
Well, we've
so
been-
that's why I'm asking.
All right, well, we've been in the pandemic for 3 years, we're out of
Yes.
it now. We still balance every budget the last 3 years.
Well, and how did we do it in the last 2 years? We had to dip into MRSA,
All
because
right,
we
if we
started
could-
with a
if we
$2.9
could
million
skip
revenue
the discussion
That's what
on
the
the
money's there for,
transfers
you.
for now and
So-
stay with the revenue
Okay,
reports,
yeah,
that'd be
that's fine.
appreciated. Any other comments, I guess for on expenses, not revenues anyways, but any other comments on
Yeah, I have a
expenses?
question on what was the maintenance on the recreation?
What page, please, Diane?
What page?
16. Like it was budgeted for
Yep.
15, and it was 30, almost 32, so to me, something happened there.
What page was that again, Diane?
15.
16,
I'm sorry, community center, Diane, is that?
16.
yeah, not the July one, the other report.
No, the end of year report.
End of year report. It's recreation center maintenance.
Let me get to that page for you, hang on.
Oh, that's page 16, Mike, it's not
16,
15.
Yep.
yeah, it was 15,000, it doubled, so I'm just curious.
Oh, wait, this is July.
I know there's pool maintenance, but this is double, so wondering if something happened that we don't know.
Yeah, there was a cracked window at the pool, and the doors at the rec center need to be replaced. That's what that was for.
Ah.
Okay, thank you.
I'll make one comment, which, if you go to the next page, you'll notice the traffic lights on page 17, under utilities. We talked about this, I think, at a prior meeting. It shows year-to-date expended of $221. Ellen Dufour looked into this on behalf of the town. She got it straightened out, and it shows an overexpenditure of $185. Mike has told me that we have gotten a refund directly from UI for this exact amount. It was in your revenue under miscellaneous.
Yes, so I had to go to the president of the UI company on that. And normally, they don't issue checks, but they would issue credits moving forward. But because of the relationship we have with the UI, myself and the president, he authorized a check. $185,000 roughly came in, and as Tim said, it's in the receipts. So even though the expenditure still shows, we got a reimbursement from the UI because they made a mistake.
They made a mistake.
Yes.
Yeah.
I knew we were paying for Wallingford's lights. I knew I could see it.
We're probably playing for the lights on House on Mill Road.
Yeah, but that's amazing. So that has nothing to do with traffic light installation, that just has to do with the cost of running those lights.
It was an error in the billing.
Yeah.
I would say.
So our budgeting is correct
Yeah.
in
Correct.
the current year.
Yeah. Now, we do, as far as the traffic lights, you'll see an over expenditure here
Yeah, we're
of
gonna
a
bring it
traffic
up.
light. And that's
184.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm getting to that. Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. So, the expenditure, you see that there's like 17,000, whatever it is in there. Well, what happened was on Universal Drive, over at the Barnes and Noble, all right, there was a light that was out, and it was causing havoc there. The parts were on back order. And so these traffic lights, to replace them, they're very expensive. New ones could cost $40,000 or $50,000. To get the parts on that, it was like 17,000 that you see in this expenditure here. So,
Okay, well, you should check eBay. Okay. Thank you, that's good. I did want to say that budgeting is an imperfect science, and Mr. Monaco and Mr. Smokowski did do the best they could, and they're amazing on how close some of these are. So if you look at the pension Social Security on page 17, they're just being off 8% on the police pension accrual. That causes us to have available an extra $141,000, and the same with the Social Security line, being 7% off another $95,000. So, of our surplus, of our of our under expenditure of $954,000, $273,000 comes from that pension Social Security section. But what is amazing is that the town pension accrual, a $1,800,000 item, we were budgeted within 1.1% on that. I think that's great. So,
Well, keep in mind, Mike, we get the numbers from the actuaries, so, I mean, these numbers should be almost exact for these items. These particular items shouldn't show much variability.
yeah, so to that point, I review the numbers with the actuaries on a regular basis to ensure that we're properly funding this. But, when we see a lesser expense come in, some of it's attributable to the fact that if we hire a new employee, they're on now, if the previous employee was on a pension, the new one's on a 457, 401A. So we pick up some savings there. So that's a little bit of part of this.
All right, any final comments or questions on the June expenditure report?
Yeah, I just wanted everyone to please turn to page 10, which is the fire department, and I'd just like to point out something that I've discussed before, which is the contractual replacement staffing line item, which, as predicted, cracked $1 million and came in at 130% of budgeted amount. And again, for this last fiscal year, in contrast with the previous year, we're assuming that there was no substantial COVID influence in which an entire shift needed to be replaced. But I'd also like to point out that we did not have 10 men on all 4 shifts for the entire fiscal year. We had 10 men on 2 shifts for half the year. Then we got up to 3 shifts halfway through the year, and then we only completed that 4th shift in May. So we really don't have any sense for exactly what a full year of 40 firefighters will look like in terms of costs. But of course, we can see what it did cost us last year, which was $1,136,043. And so if you look at that as a percentage of the full-time personnel cost, and again, this is just for 4 captains, 4 lieutenants, and 32 firefighters, that sum total, again, excluding the chief, 2 deputy chiefs, and any administrative assistants. That comes to a total of a little over $3.1 million. So these firefighters were able to augment their full-time salary from the town by an additional 36%, exclusively as a result of contractual replacement staffing. That doesn't include holidays or any other costs. So again, I think we need to pay very close attention to this particular line item throughout this year, not just at the end of the year, but each month, because I think that this is something that is going to balloon and really increase exponentially as we've now approved 2 more people, at least for half year this year, to get up to 11 people per shift.
Do you think any of that number is COVID related?
As far as I know, it has not been brought to my attention that there was a massive outbreak within the fire department. Perhaps Mr. Frieda has more insight about this.
No,
But
I'm
in
just
contrast,
saying when someone is out.
Oh, you mean
they're
the
not out for a
population.
day, they're out for a week or 2 weeks.
right. As far as I know, and again, Mr. Frieda can correct me, in contrast with the previous year, in which we did have an entire shift out for a block of time, and we had to not only bring in a new shift at time and a half, but then also wait for that shift to heal. That's how we use some of the ESSER 2 funds, I believe, was to actually cover some of those costs. But as far as I know, at least among our fire department, there was not a substantial COVID expense. Now,
The ESSER 2 or the ARPA? You're saying the ARPA?
She said ESSA, I think.
I think it was ESSER. It wasn't ARPA
Isn't
funded, wasn't
Isn't
it?
ESSER education
I
only?
thought it
No,
was
that's,
strictly for education.
yeah, ESSER's for education.
Right.
Right.
Was it, well, you gave the interview to the New Haven Register, Mike, so you know best. What was it that you talked about, that you were talking about the fire department and a portion of that funds that went to cover the expense of COVID and its ravages that
Well,
particular
that
year?
was the federal coronavirus funds. That was something different. Yeah,
That's what it
so-
was, coronavirus fund. So again, federal funding, so not ESSER 2. But in any case, that was 2020, 2021, so now we're talking about 2021, 2022. And so as far as I know, there wasn't any substantial COVID effect. Now, of course, COVID is still in our population, so that is certainly something that is resulting in medical calls within our community. But as far as I know, there was not a need for contractual replacement staffing increases as a result of COVID within the fire department. So,
Okay.
All right. Hearing no further questions, let's move on to the July reports. I know the members just got them tonight. It is only 1 month into the year. If possible, please keep these relatively short. We have a few other items on the agenda.
Can you check that building maintenance line, please?
Yes, I know. I don't have time to do it. Go through everything.
Well, just a couple of observations. We got about 48 million in tax revenue in July, which is good. So that was a
Great.
good collection month. The expenditures, it's only 1/12 of the annual of the year, of course. So some of the expenditures, you maybe look a little bit out of whack, but they will level out. And on the revenue side, what's not here is that with all this development that we have going on in town, this past week, we had a total building and fire permit fee week of well over $240,000. So that gives us a nice jump start in August to our goal again, to try to meet this building permit fee line, which we fell slightly short of this past fiscal year. We had a great run at the end. I tried to fast track some projects. Permit fees came in. We still fell a couple $100,000 short, between 200 and 300, I think it was. But now we're starting to see some of the pent-up demand, and that was one of the biggest weeks I've seen since I've been in office. About $250,000 in fees, building fees, in fire.
Mike, do you happen to know what this entry on arrears tax is for the minus 180?
Yes, so what happened with that is, you see the 180, when the Board of Assessment Appeals in March goes through their process, and they make any adjustments, people come in and are questioning the valuation, that's what that represents, Tim. The offset from the BAA decisions.
So these are rebates we had to give town
Yeah.
residents?
Yes. either rebates or if they hadn't paid their taxes, it's a reduction of what was originally projected. That's the process of the BAA.
All right, any other questions on the revenue for July? If not, any quick questions on the July expenditures?
Nothing going on
Too early.
there. Yeah, too early.
Mike, on page 6, the reserve accrued.
Let me take a look at that.
Oh, yeah.
Were you looking, Tim? Where?
Well, we spent the whole budget this month, but you did say we sold some contracts, didn't you?
Yes.
Right.
So. Yeah, we settled the supervisors union contract, and Rich has jumped right in and has 2 temporary agreements with 2 other contracts we're going to be closing in. Our goal is to narrow the gap and get union contracts solved a lot more quickly so that we don't have these large accruals that we see every year. So, and we're really, and Rich has helped tremendously on that with me, so we're really fast-tracking a lot of these contracts.
Any questions from the members on the July reports?
We didn't do Board of Ed.
I'm sorry, well, go ahead.
Oh, you moved?
We didn't do the board rep for June, she's right.
We didn't do it.
Twice, in July, the traffic light expense is very reasonable.
All right, my apologies, let's go back to June and look at the Board of Ed reports.
Okay.
I especially liked from Howard here, he's fantastic. For years, we didn't get these full explanations, but he gets pretty detailed into telling us why certain line items were over budget for the end of the last fiscal year. And there's more detail than we needed.
Mike, I'm glad you brought that up, because Howard Wardlow is the best business manager that we've seen on the Board of Ed since I've been in office. Head and shoulders above everybody. And any questions this group has, we have an agreement with the Board of Ed, Howard and Patrick, that we funnel them through Tammy, we get you the answers at the next meeting. So he's very good at answering, and he understands that that's the process. So it's really worked out well.
Yeah, my only comment is when he talked about, pensions, and he said new pairs not accounted for in the budget. So in that case, he didn't talk about it, but above, when he talked about overtime, he explained why. So, it's just one little comment, but yeah, he does explain it.
So I again, once again, I feel like this is deja vu. I'm very disappointed that the BOE end-of-year budget was, in my opinion, once again mishandled, because the expenses should not include transfers to special funds. They did this last year, and I brought it to everyone's attention. This is a violation of a Connecticut state statute. We, as a board, should be approving any surplus funds for the Board of Education, and they have to be processed into the particular account that we memorialized. Instead, for the second year in a row, they've taken what I consider to be a surplus, and I gave everyone advance notice back in May that they were going to try to do this, and they've simply squirreled it away in these special funds. Again, I am not saying that we should not have reserve funds in medical and capital and special ed. I'm not saying that.
Did you bring it to the Board of Ed's attention?
I brought this to the Board of Ed's attention when they came before us, when they presented their budget. I brought this up at the last meeting, and Mr. Frieda specifically assured me that this would be handled differently. So they're claiming they only have a surplus of $75,915, but yet they have placed in the medical fund $420,000, and in the capital fund, again, this is all outlined in Mr. Wardlow's memorandum, an additional $200,000. So in my opinion, the Board of Education concluded fiscal year 2021-22 with a surplus of $695,915. And I was promised that we would follow the Connecticut state legislation that requires our vote, as well as the Board of Education's vote, that this is what they want to do with the money. So I'm assuming that that first step has taken place, but the second step has not taken place. And so I just think that this is wrong. The way this is being done is inaccurate. And again, simply putting money in an account is not the same thing as expending that money. None of that money was actually spent in the last fiscal year. It was simply warehoused in these special funds, which again, we don't really have all of the special funds reports, so throughout the year. But I just think that this is something that is very important, again, for transparency purposes. And if this is the argument that's going to be made, then conversely, we have to do this with all of our special funds. So then, in the last fiscal year, we should claim that we spent $2.2 million in MRSA funds, even though we only spent $900,000, and we put the balance in our MRSA or municipal projects special fund. So you can't do it one way with one group and one way with another group.
Well, we have two options here. First of all, I disagree with the last part of what you said. I don't think one has to do anything with the other, but I think we have two options. We can vote on that tonight, because really, this is just a reporting. This isn't an official close of the books, okay? This is where it's at right now. But we do have the right to vote on this. We can vote on it tonight or vote on it at the next meeting and put it on the agenda. I will say this, that the three categories that they're doing it are designed to save the taxpayers money for the future. Special ed, capital, and self-insurance fund.
Right.
So the technicality, it's a correct technicality. I'm agreeing with you on this.
I'm glad.
We can vote on it. But I can't think of any better things to help the taxpayers save money than what they've shown here, to put their surplus into three accounts that in the future will cost the taxpayers a lot of money. So I'm open for either vote tonight or put it on the agenda next Board of Finance meeting.
Again, I think we should put it on the agenda for next month so that
Okay.
we can all think about it. But again, the letter of the law is not that we can vote to put this money into special funds. The letter of the law is that we have memorialized a special ed fund, one fund, and it's supposed to all go in there, and then only with the Director of Finance's permission, because Ed said that he would be the person that would be absolutely monitoring that fund and any money that comes out of it, then from there, it can go to special funds. So that's the process, and it's not something that, I'm dictating the language. This is dictated by a Connecticut state statute. And so the problem becomes this slippery slope of the Board of Ed just simply feeling as though, you know what, at the end of the year, we have $2 million left, which is what I told everyone in May. We'll spend $1 million of it quickly in the last month, which is what we're trying to avoid. And then that additional $1 million we'll simply put away into these special funds. And, that's not the way it should be done.
So I'm in agreement we could put this on the agenda, okay?
Okay.
But I just
appreciate
want,
it.
because these people watching, our fine citizens, who are watching tonight.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't want them to be deceived in any way, shape, or form, okay?
Absolutely. I
And I'm gonna repeat what I said. I agree with you, it should be on the agenda, and we'll put it on the agenda. But I want every person watching knowing that the volatility of special ed, by not funding that, could create a significant problem in the future in the mill rate calculation because we don't know how many inbound students we're going to be getting. Secondly, capital. They're putting some of the surplus, ladies and gentlemen, or they're showing it here, into a capital reserve account to protect the taxpayers from a future taxpayer expense on capital. And we're self-insured here. So they're trying to fortify the reserves so that, God forbid, if there's significant illnesses that are going to cause a drain on a self-insured fund, that would have to be in the form of a tax increase next year to fund it. So fundamentally, the three categories that they're showing here is the right thing to do. But I'm in agreement, it's got to be voted on at this meeting. We'll put it on the next agenda.
Appreciate
Okay.
that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think, Mike, I mean, Nancy said it's a law. I'm not doubting her, but I don't know myself. I mean, I think it's fair to give the Board of Ed some warning that this is going to go on the agenda. And
Yes.
personally, myself, I might want to ask Jeff, what is the law on this?
Again, I requested legal input, and when we had Joe Santafonte here, he said, there's no question that this is something that the...
I'm not disagreeing.
Right.
We'll put it on the agenda, okay?
Okay.
I just want to give the residents that are watching the rest of this story. And I think that Jeff would agree. In fact, we may have even talked to Jeff on this. And I think he might have said, yeah, it's the right thing to do. So we'll do it.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions or comments on the Board of Ed for June?
So we do have those three special funds here in these extra long sheets. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of movement within the medical and dental fund that has a beginning balance of 1.6 million and activity of $900,000. Again, to Diane's point about the capital fund, again, this is something that we really just don't have any control over, and it seems as though there are capital expenditures that are taking place left and right, that some are paid for with this capital fund, and some are paid using a wide variety of different grant sources, and there's really no way for us to know what's paying for what.
And the
So-
surplus too, remember when we had-
And the surplus fund, exactly. So they also have a capital improvement fund. And then the special ed reserve fund, again, this was established over a year ago, and, you know, it's only grown. It's over $350,000, and it didn't move at all last year. Thankfully, we didn't have to tap into that. So I just want to be clear about that. But I just wanted to say that I think having a little bit more control over these particular funds, I think would be in this board's best interest.
Any final questions or comments on the Board of Ed budget for June? All right, I did cut short for, I think, a little bit. Was there any final questions on the July expenditures? If not, I'll take a motion on the June and July budget, revenue, and Board of Ed reports.
Make a motion.
I'll take a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All right, next, we have a resolution on, for $2.6 million in road milling and paving.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, do we also need to approve the reports from July, or just for June?
I actually, we just did.
You did them all together?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's all right.
That wasn't clear to me. Okay, thank you.
When I find the resolution, I'll read it, and I'm sure Mike would like to elaborate a little bit. So, resolved, that the Board of Finance recommends that the town of North Haven appropriate $2.6 million for the milling and paving of town roadways. The project shall consist of milling and removal of waste materials, paving materials, installation of manholes and drainage risers, traffic protection, including signage and police and flag personnel. The appropriation may be spent for design, demolition, and construction costs, equipment, furnishings, materials, site improvements, survey costs, architect's fees, engineering fees, other consultant fees, legal fees, net temporary interest, and other financing costs, and other expenses related to the project, that the town shall issue bonds or notes and temporary notes in an amount not to exceed $2,600,000 to finance the appropriation.
Yeah, so thanks, Tim. So we approved this at the Board of Selectmen meeting, and I want to thank Mr. Katz for sharing, even though he's not here tonight. It was only 1 year we didn't do any paving, and myself and Ms. Boemi and Mr. Piper were trying to figure out the reasons why, and it dawned on us after Sherman said it that during a tornado, one of these major storms, we decided not to do paving. So this is a continuous process here. We have roughly 194 miles worth of roadways in North Haven. We've tried to pave 10 miles a year. So we've probably got 120 miles paved since I've been in office, and we still haven't paved the balance. To give you some perspective, the reason we do this every year, if you look at roughly 200 miles worth of roadways and factor in that the paving and milling is $200,000 per mile, you could well see it's about a $40 million project. So to have that done all at once is impossible. So we stretch it out. Now this year, the number's different. The number's $600,000 more. I put in a inflation factor, and also we're paving 11 miles this year. So I'm hoping now that with the price of oil coming down, that we won't need to spend the 2.6, but we put 2.6 in as a bonding package, knowing that we think that could be enough. But if oil goes up and it goes beyond 2.6, we're still going to spend the 2.6. And we also have town aid road that we can use to help any overage if inflation rears its head again and we end up going over the 2.6 million. So again, putting 2.6 million in, moving from 10 miles to 11, and it's an inflation factor on top of that. So that's where we're at. Cost, and I've said this before, government is no different than individual households. We are faced with inflationary pressure almost everywhere. The price of outsourcing to contractors, the work we don't do, fuel, we're really starting to see this, and we started to see it this past fiscal year. So that's the explanation of the 2.6.
I have a question for you, Mike.
Yeah.
Since this is an annual expense that's typically $2 million, is this, and I know it goes out to bid, is this something that we routinely use the same contractor?
Well, there's only really one in the state that does it, Tilcon. You know, we will go out to bid, but Tilcon, every municipality basically uses Tilcon.
Right. So even though we're going out to bid, because there's really only one contractor, we're kind of at the mercy of what they choose to charge.
I would
right?
say so, yes.
Right. Okay, so, and again, you mentioned yourself, it's about $200,000 per mile. So by adding that extra mile, in theory, it should only go up by 10%, up to $2.2 million.
Right.
And so you're adding in an additional 20% for inflation.
Right.
And you said that you have the ability to cover any additional increases by, what was the vehicle that you said?
Town aid road.
Town aid road. And is that basically MRSA?
It's a state grant. It's over and above MRSA.
Okay, and could we use MRSA for
Yes,
this?
we could.
We
Yeah,
could?
We could.
Okay.
Well, we never really have had to, because we always had enough, we call it TAR, Town Aid Road. We've always had enough. If any year that we went over the bonding, we would supplement it with the Town Aid Road, which is, you can use for paving. But that number is, for us, you know, anywhere from $150,000 to $350,000 that we get from the state every year on that.
Right, so that would actually cover quite a bit of this $600,000 increase.
If we need it.
So, again, in general, I'm absolutely in support of annual milling and paving of our town's roads, and certainly putting this to a town meeting vote. I want to be very clear about this. And as I mentioned, this has been consistently a $2 million bonded project. So, and while Mr. Frieda has mentioned that in a few years, our debt burden should in fact go down once we pay off the high school, I think it's important to also be cognizant that of the recently added debt in the police department, the new emergency communication system, school security of $2 million, and of course the most recent $3.5 million athletic field enhancements. So I have reservations about the precedent that's set by bumping up this amount to 2.6 this year. Well, is it going to be 3 million next year? Is it going to be 3.6 million the year after that? Because again, we're not just talking about a flat amount of money. This is debt. So the taxpayers will have to pay it back, principal and interest, over the course of 17 years. So again, given the fact that we have these two backup systems to actually cover these additional costs, fingers crossed that both the cost of oil, which is part of the asphalt, and the cost of the fuel that's necessary to operate all the machines. Let's hope that it at least stabilizes, if not doesn't, or perhaps goes down. So I'd like to make a counter motion that we keep this a $2 million project.
We'd have to cut roads out, and that's gonna be a problem.
No, I think we can do this at
I
10
disagree.
10 miles at the very least, possibly 11 miles. Because again, what happens, we take out $2.6 million from the bank, and it winds up not being that amount of money. We're still
Well,
paying it back.
We would use interim funding, which is bans, right? So I think what Ed has done in the past on this is he would have borrowed under a ban, right? And if you don't use the whole thing, you're not converting it to long-term debt.
That's
so-
exactly what we do.
Right.
So you would borrow it incrementally?
It's a short-term borrowing that, you know, if we pass the resolution that the dollars that are here, 2.6, and it's 2.4, then you would only have the long-term bond for 2.4.
I see.
Mr. Frieda, if the paving of roads increases from 10 to 20 or 30 miles, would the price per mile decrease?
No.
That's a good point.
No, it's all the milling and the paving. The milling is a big part of it. You know, that's the scraping of the roads.
Yes.
And then, of course, the paving. So no, there's no, in other words, Jim, there's no discount for.
Yeah.
for
What about a multi-year? If you took out a multi-year contract and lock into, you know,
They're not going to lock the price. It's so
They
highly
lock in?
dependent on oil, Jim. They're never going to lock the price for that.
okay, just
There's-
asking.
Yeah, there's so much volatility in the in the
market.
components of paving.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
I'll say this, you know, having been on this board a while, and Mike, I'm sure, remembers as well, too. When I first got on this board, which was a long time ago, we only paved roads every other year, and we used LoCIP money and town aid road, which wasn't that much money. We didn't pave a lot of road. I used to say to myself, I'd go to other towns and I'd say, geez, the roads in this town are pretty nice, you know, and ours weren't as nice. But we've been doing this a long time. We are taking on additional debt to do it, and that's a concern that should be voiced by the board. But, you know, it's necessary. I mean, some of the roads in town just aren't in that great a shape. By the way, I happen to look at our CAFR, and, you know, there's probably a whole lot of different ways you can look at our debt burden here, but I looked at it in terms of our debt per capita, which is going to be $44.15. That is $4,415 with this new borrowing, which I happen to have a little experience in municipal finance in my job. Under 5,000 is a good number. Our debt burden, which is the amount of debt compared to our GDP, is 2.4%. I think my number is in, and as a percentage of our budget, it's 7.6%, which is in the range. We've been 6-7%. It's in the capper the last couple of years, so we are still sort of in the range of where we've been.
And my goal was always not to exceed 10% debt burden to annual expenditures, because as you cross over 10%, that's where municipalities get in trouble. And also, we have a large grand list, so when we look at debt burden to grand list, it's minuscule. And that's what the rating agencies look at also.
That was actually, I didn't say it right, that's actually the 2.4.
That's, yeah, the
Yeah,
2.4.
sorry.
That's called debt ratio to
Right.
grand list.
Yeah.
So, and the rating agencies will say, you're not highly leveraged at all. So,
Right. But we have this strange combination of things that we've debt financed, such as the firehouses, the middle school, the high school, et cetera, that have a lifespan of, you know, decades, and then we're financing roads that probably do not have the lifespan of even their, you know, the debt repayment plan of 17 years. So
I think it depends on the road, Nancy. I think there's no question that a higher traffic road may have less than that, but a local residential road could go 30 years.
It depends on the traffic, whether
Yeah.
there's cars or trucks.
Right.
So,
I think just based upon the way that roads are currently paved, it's a different process than what was used, say, 25 years ago, in which roads, like the one that you live on, Mike, just have greater longevity, just the way it was done. The materials and the process.
that road is cracked, by the way, our road.
Oh, dear.
So I've been in office 13 years, you know, to give you some inside baseball, I have some of my neighbors say, hey, Mr. DeVito, Mike, can you pave our road? Nah, not this year, I gotta take care of other people, I'll say. That's what I'll say.
Yep.
So I've paved, as some of you know, I've paved the roads of some of the people in this room as elected officials.
Absolutely. Yep.
I think I'm the only elected official that hasn't had their road paved since I've been in office.
You better start listening to yourself.
So, anyway.
So,
Yes.
tar and LoCIP, are those regular revenue items?
I don't
So-
see them on here either.
So they come in
I
as,
thought that they were discontinued or renamed or something.
no, they're two subsidies that every municipality gets from the state,
Still,
yes.
I thought they were replaced by something else.
Yeah, we don't have them listed. I checked myself when you mentioned that, Mike.
So, and some of the smaller municipalities rely heavily on both tar and LoCIP.
They used to be budget items.
They were at one time, I know.
Yeah. And how much do we usually receive, or have we received in the past year?
I'll give you some rough numbers, you know, between the two, tar and LoCIP, perhaps 450 to 500,000.
Yeah, and what were they used for?
Well, LoCIP is capital projects, okay? So in other words, LoCIP, let's take the library chiller. I think we put that towards LoCIP. We took that out of our capital. So LoCIP is local capital improvement. That's what that is. TAR is town aid road for anything that's specifically to do with roadways. Drainage, paving, small roads for paving.
Those sums seem small compared to the
They are.
$40 million of roads that have to get paved every 10 years.
And they're smaller in comparison to some other municipalities ourselves.
Yeah. So your projection, though, of the need for this 2.6 is based on inflationary figures that you've seen.
Plus the additional mile of roadway. So
Yeah.
we got a really bad road in town that's a long road. It has to be done. People blown out tires, like, we gotta get it done, so.
Okay, and by the way, is Valley Service Road being done by the state? Is that part of a larger project?
No, the connection on Valley Service Road was a combination of a bond resolution that took place here in 2008,
Yeah.
plus the developer paying anything more than what the bond resolution was. So,
Oh, okay, I thought we were eligible for state funds for that at one point.
yeah, there are state funds tied into that too.
Yeah.
But that cost went so far over that the developer who leased the property to Amazon, that was a whole nother story. I had to have them in my office to tell them, we're not paying another dime, that you're gonna have to pay them.
Yeah, the promise made.
Right.
All right, can we stick with this for just a moment? Reverse over to Amazon.
Right.
Are
What
there-
would you like to talk about?
Are there any other questions on this resolution?
The paving of the 11 miles will be done exclusively in the fall, or the fall and the spring?
The fall.
Just the fall?
Yes.
Okay. So if you could just get back to us with ultimately what you feel as though will be the final cost, that would be great.
Will do. Okay.
I've read the motion into the record. Would someone like to offer a motion? I've read the resolution, sorry. Would someone like to offer a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Okay, on to old business, which we actually did touch on. We've got some revised numbers, but we're gonna do our annual budget transfers. There was some in the package, but we got some revised numbers that were given to us when we arrived today. So just to sort of refresh without going through the numbers, we generally do 3 resolutions. One is for amounts that are under $20,000 and between accounts or departments. There are 2 for over $20,000, one for within the department and one between departments. So why don't I read the first resolution? And again, this is from the revised numbers we all got tonight. Resolved that the Board of Finance approves adjustments in the appropriation of certain line items in the fiscal year 21-22 budget, transferring amounts under $20,000 to accounts as follows. Total budget transfers are $411,217. I
Need a
was,
motion?
yes, we do, Mike.
All right, my motion to accept.
All right, any discussion?
Do you need a second?
Not to discuss, right?
I just have a quick question about these three categories before we vote on them individually. If we look at this bigger document, which is the breakdown of all of the transfers, in theory, should the addition of these three numbers add up to the total, the grand total transfer down at the bottom of the last page of this document? Meaning the sum of all transfers under 20,000, all transfers over 20,000 within a department, plus all transfers over 20,000 from various departments. If you add up those three numbers, should it add up to $1,805,135?
I think the answer is yes.
Okay, so the question is, does it?
It is close.
Now that we have-
Very, very close.
Okay.
About $1,000 off.
Yeah, it's up $1,000.
Very close.
I got it off, it's only off $500.
Yeah.
We could change this.
Okay. Yeah, the numbers that I had, that I was working with before was off by a lot more than that, so.
All right, so I thought we'd deal with these individually. We have a motion, we've had some discussion. Any more discussion on this particular item? If not, I'll take a second and motion.
Make
Second,
that motion.
Yeah, I'm okay with this figure because it's not less, it's slightly less.
all right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Secondly, resolved that the Board of Finance approves adjustments in the appropriation within the same department in the fiscal year 21-22 budget, transferring amounts over $20,000 to accounts as follows. The budget transfers are $441,821. There is a separate sheet that we were given this evening which details those. There's only about a dozen or so items on here. Anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion on that.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
So the item that was added was cemetery at $21,139.
So that's added to the next item. That's added to the last one. The
Oh,
ninth-
sorry, so we're within, sorry.
Yeah, so this
This
number,
number
this
did
in
not
different orders.
change from what we were given in our reports.
So that's exactly the same, yep.
Right.
Got it.
All right, we have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Resolved that the Board of Finance recommends the following adjustments in appropriations of certain line items among the various departments in the 21-22 budget, transferring amounts over $20,000 as follows. Sum total is $952,598. Again, we've gotten a breakdown of that, again, 8 to 10 different accounts. Nancy's already looked at it, and the difference from what we got in our reports, I guess, is the $21,000 in cemetery.
Yep, that's it.
I'll take a motion.
to accept.
Any second?
Second.
Discussion. Hearing no discussion?
I
All
don't
those
I
in
don't know
favor?
why, I don't know why it's off by 500, but let's just move on,
Right.
that's fine.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Lastly, resolve that the Board of Selectmen be requested to call a special town meeting or include same on the agenda of the annual town meeting for appropriations of certain line items among the various departments in the 21-22 budget, transferring amounts over $20,000.
Make a motion.
Second, please.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Is there a date on that?
September 17th. Yep.
Number 17. Got it.
All right, that concludes our agenda. Move on to public comment. Ms. Quinn.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Sally Buemi, 5 Blossom Drive. I love the podium. First, Mr. Doheny, I am so happy to welcome you here as the chairman of this Board of Finance. I had the pleasure of serving with you for 4 years on the Board of Selectmen, and we may have had our disagreements on occasions, but they were always respectful, and we always listened to each other. And so I'm confident that your tenure as chair of this very important Board of Finance will be a new beginning of respectful discourse of the issues that face the Board of Finance, and that all members will be heard, especially during budget formulation process. And I'm also hopeful that as chairman, Mr. Donahue, you will facilitate and encourage public comment and not threaten to end public comment at Board of Finance meetings, as we heard on several occasions under the previous chairmanship. So I'm very happy that you're sitting there, sir.
It's a bit premature. There could be a contentious vote next month, so you never know.
Okay, you never know. We're all here for the town. That's what I hope. I have a few questions. I had a bunch of prepared ones and some new ones that came up during the meeting. Regarding the ESSER 2 mistake from the 21-22 fiscal year, that was the, what was that?
400-something thousand. 433 maybe?
475.
475. The current budget, 22-23, which we've just begun, on page 7, also has federal ESSER 2 of 247.99. Is that, so we're not getting that? That's another mistake. Okay. And what about the federal ESSER 3? We have, for the first time in our budget, for 22-23, our new budget, $750,984.
We don't know about that one yet, Sally.
Okay.
That is something that's still up in the air right now.
Right. Well, I will admit, as the chair admitted, I'm no expert on this ESSER funding, but I just, you know, I noticed it as soon as you had mentioned it for the previous fiscal year.
Yep.
I have the current book with me, and I looked in the current book, and I saw it there, but it's fortunately a much smaller amount, 247,000, but okay. I had a question, some questions on the expenditure budget. Gee, even with this podium, it's hard. Hold on.
You want a larger podium?
No, don't be cheeky, you.
It's not in the budget.
Okay, there you go.
The Board of Ed has money.
Well, let me just look at something that I have found right away. I was very happy to hear Mr. Frieda agree with Mrs. Barrett to put on the agenda next month the 420,000, the Board of Ed report from Mr. Wardlow, and I agree. He is a very good finance director and has always, I think on 2 occasions I've spoken with him, has been very good. But on his report here, he talks about the 420,000 to medical and 200,000 to capital. So I was very pleased to hear that you will vote on that, because I rewatched the May meeting, and you did assure Mrs. Barrett that the Board of Finance would vote. So I was very happy to hear that. But so last year there were 3 different funds they put the million in. It was the medical, the capital, and the special ed. This year they're only talking about 400 only, it's still a lot of taxpayer money, 420,000 to medical and 200 to capital. And I just had a question about those long forms, which I had a second ago and now I can't find. Here they are. If you look at, these are the long Board of Ed forms, the legal size. If you look at the one for capital, and you look at the last line there, it says excess budget from 21-22, and if you look way, way over to the right, you see the 200,000 that Mr. Wardlow references in his summary, that 200,000 goes to capital. They already have it in there. Sorry?
Yeah, it was done in June.
Yes, so they call it excess budget, which again, does sound a lot like surplus, which it is. But I looked at the one for medical dental, and I can't find the 420. But that, you would think that if they put the 200 in the capital, the 420 would be somewhere in the medical. But I was also very happy, the main reason why I wanted to talk about this long medical form is that its current balance at 2.4 million is actually 9.7% higher than the actuarial reserve recommendation.
That's
So
the midpoint, though.
I'm sorry?
It's the midpoint of the recommendation.
Yeah, well, it looks, I was percent of midpoint level. Well, it looked good to me, that's all I'm saying. But I didn't see the 420, but I did see the 200 and the other, so I just wanted to mention that. I had a question about, on page 5 of your year-end expenditure report, the cemetery commission was over by 14,000. They're not usually over. The only reason why and what was really over in the cemetery commission section on page 5 was maintenance of grounds. And when I saw that, I was reminded of some research I did, and Tim, you might recall, you were on the Board of Finance at the time. We had a town citizen consistently complaining at Board of Selectmen meetings that the racquetball club was illegally on some land dedicated for a cemetery. So I did a tremendous amount of research on that, and I proved that he was incorrect, that it was not in the will of Mr. Stiles. But anyway, during that research, I came across a special fund that the cemetery has, and it had about $250,000 to $300,000 in it. And I had never known about it before. And in fact, once I found out about that, I talked about repairing the old cemetery on the green, because about 20 stones were flat. Some of them were Revolutionary War veterans. And we actually used some of that money, and Mr. Frieda supported my idea, and we used some of that money from that maintenance trust fund to cover those expenses. So if, you know, this 14,000 overage on the cemetery commission, why is that on the backs of the taxpayer? Why can't we dip into that maintenance trust fund? I assume it still has well over 250,000 in it.
I'm assuming that's for perpetual care, Sally. I'm not sure of
No,
that.
so,
I thought it was for maintenance, and we used it to maintain the cemetery on the green.
so out of that overage there,
Yeah.
it's about $7,450 of that is a fence that had collapsed.
Okay.
So that's part of that.
Right.
And then the contract went up, the maintenance contract, because we asked them to do some other things over and above the contract in the
Right.
cemetery. So we chose to do it this way. You know, we have depleted that account. I suppose what we could consider is reimbursing the town out of the account. I don't think we'll be able to reimburse the town out of the account for the extra things we asked the contract, over and above the contract, but I suppose that we could consider reimbursing the town out of the fund for the $7,400 plus
For the
dollars
fence.
for the fence.
Yeah, I agree, because I remember, again, during that research for that other issue,
Yep.
I actually saw the trust fund back when the North Haven Cemetery Association owned all the cemeteries. At the time they transferred them to the town, they transferred this
Yep.
fund.
We'll make a note of that, and we'll see if we can do
I
that.
just think, that it's there, it's sitting there
Right.
doing nothing. We used it once before, and, I know it's not a lot of money, but if we have a special account for something specific, why not use it and take it off of the taxpayers' backs? That's all I wanted to
We'll definitely take a look
say
at that.
about that.
There may be another fund, Sally, I know you said you looked into it, but I'm looking at the CAFR. The only fund I see is a permanent fund for the cemetery. I don't see a special fund for the
Okay,
cemetery.
well, you know what, somewhere
Yeah.
in my record keeping
There
at
is.
home, I have my packet from that research, and
Yeah.
I have a copy of that trust
Could have been an
fund.
Let me
individual.
ask Tim, what are
Yeah.
you showing in CAFR? How much, Tim? What's in
It's
the
like
balance?
close, it was the permanent fund was like around 300.
Okay, so that's the one Sally's talking about, I think,
Well,
so.
again, I thought it
Yeah.
was for maintenance, and
Right.
we used it to,
It
Am I right?
allows the interest to be used for, I just turned the page unfortunately,
Okay.
Sally, but.
But I know what you're talking about, Sally.
yeah, okay.
So,
It just jumped out at me, and I remembered that account and the good old days of, that issue kept coming up at our meetings. So I just wanted to bring that up. You stressed that the current vacancy on the Board of Finance will be filled within a month. So we had talked about this at the August 4th
yeah.
Board of Selectmen meeting, because at that meeting, we accepted Mr. Monaco's letter of resignation effective July 1st. So it is my understanding, reading the charter, that we have to fill it 60 days from the vacancy, not 60 days from us accepting
Yeah.
the resignation. So will we or will we not be filling it sometime in August?
You're going to be hearing from Valerie for
Okay.
a special meeting for us, Mr. Piper, who's back there, and we're looking at next Thursday.
Fine. Okay, because
So-
I heard somebody say within a month, and
I
I'm like,
said that.
no, we have 12 days to go.
Next Thursday. Next
Okay,
Thursday's
I
the
just
date.
want to make
Right.
sure, this board is too important to have a member improperly replaced, so.
I've got two outstanding candidates. So
Good.
we have to choose one of the two.
Get a coin, figure it out.
You'll hear from Valerie, and Mr. Piper will also on a Thursday meeting.
Okay. Let's see what else. I'm a little disappointed. I don't want to take anything away from Ingrid, the person that you identified as you hired to fill the controller/CPA position that's in our employment table for this fiscal year. I'm sure she's capable with good credentials, but I have to be honest, I'm going to state to this board what I said at the Board of Selectmen meeting, in case you all don't watch our exciting Board of Selectmen meetings. Mr. Smikowski always told me, and he had said it publicly at these meetings, he's the only CPA down there, meaning downstairs in the finance office. And with Ingrid not being a CPA and Mr. Monaco as a Director of Administration and Procurement, also not a CPA, we have 0 CPAs overseeing our $116 million budget. I have great confidence, of course, in Mr. Frieda, but it was earmarked for a CPA position, and so I do have concerns about that.
So let me address that.
Thank you.
So I may have mentioned this at a previous meeting, but the CPAs are coming in at $130,000+.
Yeah.
And the highest paid person on the town side is like $136,000 or $138,000. It's certainly not me. It's someone else. So you can't bring a CPA in higher than the next highest person. We had budgeted, what we did. So we had to fit what the budget was. Now, please don't take this the wrong way, but I've come to the conclusion here, after micromanaging every detail of this government the past year, including when Ed was sick before he passed away, that I was the CEO of a billion-dollar company. I oversaw CFOs. I've come to the conclusion that with me here, for as long as I'm going to be here, with Ingrid here, and with Rich's knowledge of contracts and union negotiations, we're going to get by, believe me.
Okay. Well, you heard me qualify my statement, but I have great respect for your abilities, but I'm just remembering, Ed Swinkowski's words of wisdom to me about the lack of a second CPA, so
I think, you know what it points to, Sally, too?
Yeah.
We talked about this maybe at a Board of Selectmen
We
meeting.
did, we did.
We're, it's tough getting qualified people into government positions. The pay is just not there compared to the private sector.
Right, and this comptroller, I mean, it's a matter of public record, it's in our budget, this comptroller CPA position was $84,900.
Right.
And why couldn't you pay more to get a CPA for $130?
Well, that would be way beyond what we budgeted. So how am I going to, you know, we have that position that's a supervisor's union position, right?
Right.
So she'll come in at that 85,000 plus whatever the raise was in the contract, okay?
Right.
But to bring in a CPA at 139,000, let's say 136,
Right.
when the budget's for 85, how am I going to justify that?
I agree with you. The employment table is
Yeah.
the 85,000, I think
Right.
it was 84,980 something. So,
Right.
yeah, 85. I agree with you. You can't go over, you agree with, that you can't go over
I
the
can't go
employment
over.
table.
Right, I can't, yeah.
Right. Which is why a few years ago, I objected to those mid-fiscal year promotions of the lieutenants to captains and the firefighters to lieutenants in mid-fiscal year, because they all got immediate raises above and beyond what was in the employment table. So you've sort of proved my point on that.
Well, I think, sorry, anyway, let's.
Yeah, that's for another
Yeah,
time.
another time.
So let me just quickly look at my notes and see. Oh, yeah, on the revenue budget, page 2, the year-end revenue budget, under town miscellaneous receipts, that was 309% over,
Yeah.
about,
Part of that
now,
was the UI.
part of that was the 184.
Underneath, yeah. for you.
184,000, I understand that. But there's still a significant more overage there. It was,
Yeah.
what was that? 'Cause that might
300,
be,
I can tell
sorry?
you. I can tell you.
Yes, thank you.
300, sometimes I try to fast track. I understand what people
Yeah.
are saying, so I try
No
to cut to
problem.
the chase. 300,000 for Quinnipiac. President Olean met with me and gave me 300,000, which he deposited in the town for a voluntary payment,
Hallelujah, okay.
and with a commitment this coming year. So-
Okay, well, that's great, because that's what I was going to suggest, that let's keep in mind that line being so far over, discounting, of course, for the 185 for the traffic light. I don't think the UI will make the same mistake again.
Right.
But that's an area where we could increase revenue.
So next year, what
Yeah.
my plan will be is to take 300 out of that line
Yeah.
and put it in a Quinnipiac voluntary payment
Yes,
line.
we used to have it
which-
separated.
Which is what we had, right? So,
Back in the old days when they
right.
made that. Yeah, I wish it was a little more, but we'll take the 300 as it is, in fact, a voluntary payment. So just give me one moment, Mr.
Sure,
Chairman.
yeah. Okay.
I had some other notes. I think I covered everything. I did. So again, good luck.
Thank you.
Congratulations, or my condolences, whichever applies.
I think the latter.
Have a nice evening. Thank you for your
Thanks.
time and attention.
Okay.
We only have one other person in attendance. Would you like to ask any questions, sir?
No, I think all the questions have been.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone like to offer a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion?
Second, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
The preceding program is brought to you in part through a grant from the town of North Haven. Watch town meetings or other videos on demand at nhtv.com.